welcome. I'm James Ezimoha and you're watching A News. Let's see your headlines. U.S. President Donald Trump says Iran's ceasefire is on a massive life support after Washington rejects Tehran deal. UK leader Keir Starmer fights to stay in office as lawmakers urge him to resign. And a tanker carrying Azerbaijani oil has arrived in Japan, marking a first between the two countries. The fragile ceasefire between Washington and Tehran is on life support, U.S. President Donald Trump told reporters in the Oval Office. He flatly rejected the latest peace proposal from the Islamic Republic as the U.S. ramps up economic pressure on the country.
A new diplomatic crisis is unfolding between the United States and Iran after President Donald Trump warned that efforts to secure a ceasefire are now hanging by a thread. From the Oval Office, Trump delivered some of his strongest remarks yet against Tehran, describing Iran's latest response to Washington's peace proposal as garbage and signaling a return to a maximum pressure campaign.
It's unbelievably weak, I would say. I would call it the weakest right now. After reading that piece of garbage they sent us, I didn't even finish reading it. They said, I'm not going to waste my time reading it. I would say it's one of the weakest right now. It's on life support. They understand. These are all medical people. Dr. Oz, life support is not a good thing. Do you agree?
Diagnostic.
I would say the ceasefire is on massive life support, where the doctor walks in and says, sir, your loved one has approximately a 1% chance of living.
Central to the deadlock remains Washington's demand for the total dismantling of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, a point the president insists is non-negotiable for global security.
Very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. They can't have it. And if they did have it, the Middle East would be gone, Israel would be gone, and then hit Europe probably next. We're doing the service to the world.
In Tehran, the rhetoric is equally uncompromising. The Iranian Foreign Ministry maintains that its proposals are the only viable path to regional stability, accusing the US of being captive to Israeli interests.
Regrettably, the United States still insists on one-sided views and unreasonable demands, which are largely based on mindsets influenced by Israel.
As diplomacy falters, the US Treasury has announced fresh sanctions against 12 individuals and entities spanning Hong Kong, the UAE, and Oman. The move targets the IRGC's shadow fleet used to ship oil to China. Adding fuel to the fire, new reports suggest the conflict has already expanded. Investigative reports claim the UAE secretly struck an Iranian refinery on Levan Island in April, leading to massive Iranian retaliatory strikes on Emirati infrastructure. With tensions affecting maritime routes and US naval forces on alert, attention now turns to President Trump's upcoming meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping, where Washington is expected to press Beijing on energy ties with Tehran.
Great Britain's political scene is under strain as Prime Minister Keir Starmer faces mounting pressure within his own Labour Party. The unrest comes as senior figures raise concerns over his leadership following a series of recent political setbacks. Here's more.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is facing growing pressure from within the Labour Party, Britain's governing centre-left party, after around 70 Labour members of Parliament called for him to resign or urged him to announce when he plans to step down. Reports suggest splits are emerging inside Keir Starmer's cabinet, with some senior ministers privately supporting calls for a timetable for his departure, including Britain's Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood, who privately urged Keir Starmer to consider setting a clear timetable for his departure from office. The backlash follows disappointing election results across several parts of the UK. In Wales, one of the four nations that make up the United Kingdom, Labour lost control of the Welsh Parliament in Wales, while in Scotland, the Scottish National Party secured a fifth consecutive term in power. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage and his Reform UK party have made significant gains in local elections, winning more than 1,400 council seats in England and increasing pressure on Labour's leadership direction. Starmer has not directly responded to resignation calls, but has acknowledged government mistakes while defending his long-term strategy. In an attempt to shift momentum, he announced plans to nationalise British steel after a failed private sale and signalled closer ties with the European Union following Brexit. The coming weeks will be decisive for Starmer as he tries to restore confidence in his leadership or faces growing calls from within Labour to step down.
The United Kingdom and France are leading a major diplomatic push to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. On Tuesday, defense ministers from over 40 countries will meet to finalize plans for a new multinational escort mission. The talks will focus on mine clearing and air patrols to protect commercial vessels in what French President Emmanuel Macron calls a neutral effort to restore trade. It marks the first high-level summit for the operation as Europe seeks its own path to secure global shipping. European Union defense ministers gathered in Brussels on Tuesday for the Foreign Affairs Council defense meeting. The talks are chaired by the bloc's foreign policy chief, Kai Kallas, and will focus on strengthening Europe's security and more. EU ministers are discussing continued support for Ukraine and Brussels, or as Brussels considers how to use a proposed €90 billion loan package to meet Kiev's urgent military needs. The Middle East is also high on the agenda, particularly the situation in Lebanon, where European officials are exploring the possibility of a new mission to support the Lebanese armed forces. European governments are also pushing manufacturers to increase arms production in timely manners.
We have the Defense Minister of Ukraine joining us, and of course there also the question how we can use the 90 billion loan and how does that all proceed so that it would answer to the urgent needs of Ukraine. And then we have a discussion of the defense industry and also together with the industry actually, because we see the problem that the defense ministers are pushing. The countries have a lot of funding on the table, but the defense industry is not ramping up their production. We discuss also Middle East, and Middle East specifically with the defense ministers, two topics. One is Lebanon. As we know, UNIFIL is ending by this year, and there is a willingness of the Europeans to put together another mission to actually help the Lebanese armed forces, and of course we are already helping them.
All right, after the break, we'll take a close look at the key stories shaping the region. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. We bring you an exclusive investigation into growing questions surrounding French military-linked flights to Armenia. Flight tracking records show movements by French Air and Space Force aircraft following President Emmanuel Macron's visit to Yerevan, raising questions over whether diplomacy was accompanied by a wider defense logistics operation. The record do not prove what was transported, but with French-made Caesar howitzers now appearing in Armenia ahead of Republic Day celebrations, scrutiny is growing over cargo declarations, transit permissions, and possible military deliveries. Here's the story.
What is France really doing in Armenia? French reporting gives the official frame. According to Le Figaro, President Emmanuel Macron's visit to Yerevan centered on a strategic partnership with Armenia. Defense cooperation was already part of that picture, with Armenia's 2024 order of 36 French-made Caesar howitzers. But the questions now go further. They ask whether the public partnership was moving alongside a deeper military track. Macron arrived in Armenia in early May. His formal state visit began on May 5th. Then come the aircraft records. ADSB material shows an Airbus A330-200 of the French Air and Space Force flying toward Yerevan on May 4th. The next day, it left Yerevan for Paris. Hours later, the aircraft flew from Paris to Istres-le-Tubet, a French military airbase. This proves movement, not cargo, but it raises the logistics question. Was this only official transport or part of a wider military support chain? The same aircraft appears earlier in separate tracking material, moving east from Europe on March 28th, then appearing around the South Korea-Japan area between March 29th and April 3rd. That timing matters. In Japan, French and Japanese defense ministers signed the Japan-France Defense Roadmap on April 1st. In South Korea, Macron and President Lee Jae-myung agreed on April 3rd to deepen cooperation, including in defense and energy. Again, this proves movement, not cargo, but it places the aircraft inside a wider pattern of defense-linked diplomacy. Then came the A400M file. A tracking image from May 11th shows a French military A400M moving eastward toward the South Caucasus. According to the claim being examined, cargo linked to this route was declared to Georgia as gas cylinders, lithium batteries, and chemical substances. But the question is whether the actual cargo was different, possibly Caesar-related components, assemblies, or support equipment. That question became sharper after Caesar howitzers appeared in footage from Yerevan ahead of Armenia's May 28th Republic Day parade. So the issue is not only Macron's visit, it is what moved around it. What was declared to Georgia? What permission was granted? And did the cargo match the legal status of the flight? Under the 1944 Chicago Convention, civilian and military aircraft operate under different legal regimes. So if military cargo was moved under a misleading declaration, it would raise questions about airspace permission, transit approval, and the integrity of civil aviation rules. The public record shows partnership. The flight records show movement. The footage shows Caesar systems in Armenia, and the cargo claim still needs verification. Until the A400M manifest, Georgia's transit permission, ICAO compliance records, and independent confirmation are clear, the case remains open, not proven, but serious enough to demand answers.
En effet, en quelque sorte de la majorité géopolitique de sortir de cette entrave et de se tourner vers l'Europe. On ne peut pas faire comme si ça n'existait pas, nous Français. On doit embrasser ce choix et l'engager.
Parliamentary elections in Armenia are scheduled for June 7th, with the official campaign period beginning on May 8th. According to Central Election Commission, a total of 19 political forces will compete for seats in the country's parliament. The Armenian election study has released new polling data ahead of the vote, offering insight into voter attitudes and the party support during the campaign period.
As Armenia approaches the 7th of June parliamentary election, the Armenian election study has released new survey data showing continuity in voter attitudes on key issues, including security, the economy, and the country's overall direction. The survey concluded on May 2nd, 2026, with a sample size of 925 respondents. The first survey asked respondents whether the country is headed in the right or wrong direction, a key measure in voter behaviour polling that captures overall public sentiment. 44% of respondents said Armenia is headed in the right direction, while 30.9% said it is not, and 24.7% did not take a position. According to the Armenian election study, this reflects a net 5.4% improvement in public perceptions of the country's trajectory. The question on the Prime Minister's job approval also showed a positive trajectory for the incumbent government, with 49% of respondents approving of Nikol Pashinyan's performance, 33.7% disapproving, and 16.1% expressing no position. Public perceptions on the state of the economy remain one of the stronger indicators of electoral performance in Armenia. The retrospective question asked respondents how they would assess the current state of the economy compared to the previous year. In response, 41.7% of respondents stated that the economy is better now than it was a year ago, while 28.5% said it had gotten worse. A further 21.6% felt it had remained the same, and 6.2% provided no response. Building on these economic perceptions, the next positional question focused on respondents' views of TRIP. 36.2% of respondents view TRIP as being beneficial to Armenia, while 36.3% do not believe that it will bring stability and economic growth. A further 25.5% remained undecided or non-committed. Overall, the results indicate a near-even split in opinion, with a slight plurality of respondents expressing a negative view of TRIP, while a significant share of the public remains uncertain. According to the results of Armenian election study, around 85% of respondents say they will take part in the 7th of June parliamentary elections. When it comes to vote intention, the initial findings show the ruling Civil Contract Party in the lead, with 32.5% support.
Azerbaijan strengthens its role in regional transit and logistics as the first dry cargo vessel, Gadamli, built in Turkmenistan, arrives at the Baku International Sea Trade Port. The new vessel is expected to boost cargo transportation between Baku and Turkmenbashi and support the growing development of the middle corridor connecting Asia and Europe. Our correspondent Gochin Kojalieva has more.
Hello from Port of Baku, where behind me stands the newly arrived dry cargo vessel Gadamli, officially welcomed during a ceremonial reception at the Baku International Sea Trade Port. Built in Turkmenistan, the vessel has completed its maiden voyage across the Caspian Sea and is expected to strengthen cargo transportation links between the ports of Baku and Turkmenbashi. Officials say the vessel will operate regular container transportation services between Baku and Turkmenbashi, supporting the development of the middle corridor and wider Eurasian trade routes.
Within the next 3 to 4 months, or by the end of the year at the latest, another new vessel with similar technical capabilities is expected to be commissioned. That vessel will be named Menzil. By the end of the year, Turkmenistan plans to jointly operate 2 cargo ships built at the Balkan Shipbuilding and Repair Yard, the Gadamli vessel we welcomed and the Menzil dry cargo vessel that is expected to be ready by the end of the year.
The Gadamli has a carrying capacity of 6,100 tons and can transport up to 240 standard shipping containers. Port authorities say the vessel is expected to contribute to increasing cargo turnover at the port of Baku as regional transit volumes continue to grow. The welcoming ceremony brought together railway, maritime and port officials, underlying the strategic importance of cooperation between Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan in expanding transport connectivity across the Caspian Sea. This is Gülçin Hocalayeva with Zohrab Shirinov for A News.
A tanker carrying 45,000 kiloliters of Azerbaijani crude oil has arrived in Japan, marking a historic first for the two nations as the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz continues. The shipment, totaling over 280,000 barrels, is part of Tokyo's urgent strategy to diversify energy sources away from the volatile Middle East. This delivery represents a strategic milestone for Japan, establishing a new energy corridor from Central Asia that bypasses regional choke points. The shipped oil is now headed to INEOS's Negeshi refinery to bolster fuel supplies for the Greater Tokyo area. An important Turkish-Syrian border crossing is reopening to civilian traffic for the first time in more than a decade. The Akçakale crossing, which sits opposite Syria's town of Tel Abyad, will resume passport-based entry and exit procedures as of Tuesday, May 12th. Here are the details.
One of Turkey's key land crossings into northern Syria will reopen fully to civilian travel on Tuesday for the first time in more than a decade. The Akçakale land border gate, located in Turkey's Şanlıurfa province opposite the Syrian town of Tel Abyad, is set to resume passport-based entry and exit procedures as of Tuesday, May 12th. According to Şanlıurfa provincial officials, the move comes in line with a directive from Turkey's Interior Ministry. The crossing was first closed to traffic in 2014 as the conflict in Syria escalated, and the border region became increasingly unstable. Limited operations resumed in 2019, but only for humanitarian aid deliveries, commercial cargo, and authorized public officials. Under the new arrangement, 3 groups will be allowed to use the crossing with a valid passport: Turkish citizens, Syrians with dual citizenship, and Syrian nationals legally residing in Turkey with a valid residence or work permit. The reopening is significant because this part of the border was one of the most sensitive zones during the Syrian conflict, which lasted from 2011 to late 2024. Throughout the course of the war, Tel Abyad changed hands several times, becoming a flashpoint in 2015 when the ISIS terrorist group briefly captured the town. For Turkey, the move is also tied to the wider question of normalization along its border with Syria. Turkey continues to host more than 3 million registered Syrians, many under temporary protection status. So the reopening of the crossing isn't just a technical border decision, but a sign of rapidly shifting conditions in war-torn Syria's northern region. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Afghanistan's Environmental Protection Agency will take part in the World Urban Forum in Baku later this month. Officials say the country plans to use the event to highlight Afghanistan's environmental challenges. Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
Afghanistan's Environmental Protection Agency is preparing to take part in the World Urban Forum in Azerbaijan. The preparations were discussed during a meeting here in Kabul between the Director General of the Environmental Protection Agency, Matiullah Khalis, and the head of the UN Habitat in Afghanistan, Stephanie Luz, along with her delegation. According to the official statement, the meeting focused on arrangements for an Afghan delegation led by Matiullah Khalis to travel to Baku for the upcoming World Urban Forum. At the start of the meeting, the Director General welcomed the UN Habitat delegation and described the visit as important for Afghanistan. He asked UN Habitat officials to help make the necessary arrangements for the Afghan delegation's participation and to support strong coordination with relevant international bodies during the forum. The statement says Afghanistan wants to use the conference to highlight its existing environmental challenges. Both sides agreed that the country's priorities should be presented clearly to the international community. Stephanie Luz, the head of the UN Habitat in Afghanistan, thanked the Director General and briefed him on the World Urban Forum and the arrangements for the event in Baku. The World Urban Forum will be held in Baku from 17 to 22 May. It is co-organized by UN Habitat and the government of Azerbaijan. The forum is a major global event on sustainable urban development, focusing on housing, planning, resilience, and climate challenges. For Afghanistan, the participation in the Baku Forum is expected to be an opportunity to raise issues linked to environmental pressure, urban growth, climate vulnerability, and the need for international cooperation. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
All right, after the break, we'll examine how Armenia's upcoming parliamentary elections are becoming increasingly intertwined with the wider Azerbaijan-Armenia peace process and broader geopolitical competition in the region. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Now, with Armenia's parliamentary elections approaching, attention is increasingly turning to the geopolitical dimensions surrounding the vote, including the future of the peace process with Azerbaijan, regional normalization efforts, and outside influence from Russia, the West, and elements of the Armenian diaspora. Joining us now to discuss this is Matthew Breiser, former U.S. diplomat, joining us from Istanbul, Turkey. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me with you.
Now, as Armenia moves toward the 7th of June elections, to what extent has the peace process with Azerbaijan become part of the domestic political battle itself?
I think it has very much so inside of Armenia because as we know, a year ago in March, Azerbaijan and Armenia finalized the text of the peace treaty. Then on August 8th, in the White House in Washington, in the presence of President Trump, the foreign ministers of both countries initialed that text. But President Aliyev has said he won't sign it until and unless Armenia amends its constitution to remove any sort of ambiguity regarding Armenia's recognizing Azerbaijan's full territorial integrity. And so amending a constitution is obviously, like in any country, a complex and difficult political process. It requires a supermajority, so 2/3 majority of parliament, and then a national referendum. And so Russia does not want to see that peace treaty move forward. Neither do the many opponents of peace in Armenia. And therefore, there's a strong push a further push to defeat Pashinyan and his political movement to end that peace process and the prospect of amending the constitution of Armenia.
Now, President Ilham Aliyev's remarks in Zangilan were widely interpreted as indirect support for Pashinyan's peace agenda. How significant was that signal politically and strategically?
Well, I mean, that one signal is as significant as the many others that President Aliyev has sent along the same lines, and each of those is very significant. You know, he said recently, a week and a half ago or so, that Azerbaijan and Armenia are now existing in a state of peace. So he says, de facto, we are at peace. You know, I was recently in Baku and heard across the very top of the government a shared sense that, you know, thank goodness Nikol Pashinyan is the prime minister, because he really is in favor of peace, and he really does face some opponents, both in the Armenian diaspora and, of course, in Armenia itself, who do not want a peace process and are strongly supporting the opposition. So President Aliyev is making unambiguously clear that he wants to finalize that peace treaty and wants then to pull both Armenia and Azerbaijan together toward a peaceful and more prosperous future with joint investments in infrastructure projects and in many economic sectors.
Now, some observers argue that gradual trust building between Baku and Yerevan has indirectly strengthened Pashinyan politically. Is that assessment credible?
I'm not sure. I mean, it depends on who we're talking about in Armenian politics. Again, those people who are against a peace treaty with Azerbaijan, those people who are pro-Russian, they don't want to see Pashinyan win, and so when Azerbaijan expresses its desire to move forward on the peace process with Pashinyan, that hurts Pashinyan with that sector of Armenian politics. But I think the majority of Armenians, they realize it's time to move forward, it's time for peace. Nikol Pashinyan is the champion of a peace agreement with Azerbaijan, and therefore, I think on balance, such statements actually help Pashinyan.
Now, the timing of the reported Atlantic Council Grand Deal proposal has drawn particular attention. Does its logic genuinely align with the current direction of the peace process?
It does not, and I'm a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. I used to be a member of that program, and I was I found myself sharply disagreeing with those colleagues of mine when I read the report, which doesn't seem to proceed from much of an understanding of the dynamics of either the peace process or of the U.S.-Azerbaijan relationship. And what do I mean? First of all, the whole premise of that grand bargain is that Azerbaijan would release political prisoners, including some Armenians, in exchange for President Trump lifting Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act, which limits U.S. assistance to the government of Azerbaijan. And that report cites the example of the Trump administration having done something similar with Belarus. Well, Belarus and the U.S. are adversaries, right? And so President Trump was using the need to release political prisoners as leverage on Lukashenko and the leadership of Belarus. Azerbaijan and the U.S., however, have a strategic partnership. The U.S. isn't looking to use leverage with Azerbaijan. It's looking to partner with Azerbaijan using American investments and company presence in Azerbaijan and the region to build a deepened strategic partnership with Azerbaijan. And again, to do what I said before with regard to Azerbaijan and Armenia working together, building a foundation for peace and prosperity through joint investments. A second big problem with that report is that it refers to unlawfully detained or imprisoned Armenians. what that is referring to are the former leaders of an illegal ethnic Armenian separatist regime inside Azerbaijan in Karabakh, who, contrary to the November 10, 2020 ceasefire statement signed by Prime Minister Pashinyan and President Aliyev and President Putin, remained on Azerbaijani territory with a political regime that was separatist, and also Armenian soldiers in contravention of that agreement were also on Azerbaijani territory. Those illegal actions are rightfully punished by Azerbaijan. So my colleagues at the Atlantic Council don't seem aware of the point of who these imprisoned Armenians are. They're not just private citizens who got caught up in a military conflict. These were leaders of an illegal separatist regime on Azerbaijan's territory.
Now, Turkish-Armenian normalization is also progressing alongside the Azerbaijan-Armenian track. How interconnected are these processes now?
Very. As we know, back in the early 1990s, Turkey shut its border with Armenia in solidarity with Azerbaijan after Armenia attacked and occupied Nagorno-Karabakh then, and then the 7 surrounding territories. And in my own conversations with current and former very senior Turkish officials, they have made clear all the way through this period since the Second Karabakh War that of course they want to normalize relations with Armenia, but they're not going to take any measures that make Azerbaijan uncomfortable. And Azerbaijan has clearly said, we want to sign that peace treaty and don't want anything to get in the way of that. So yeah, the two processes are interlinked by choice of both Azerbaijan and Turkey, which are strategic treaty allies, by the way.
Now, final question for you, sir. Is the Armenian election now primarily a domestic political contest or increasingly a geopolitical referendum on the future direction of the region?
Well, I suppose, I mean, I can't climb into the head of all the Armenian voters, but probably a mixture of both. I think those Armenians who I mentioned before who are in favor of a peace treaty with Azerbaijan want that because they think their lives will be better, not only because there won't be war with Azerbaijan, but because this will be the way to reintegrate Armenia into both the regional economy of the South Caucasus and with Turkey and beyond with Europe. And so there's a geopolitical element there. There's also a geopolitical element in that Russia does not want to see Armenia moving toward the European Union and away from Russia. So there are geostrategic thinkers in Russia who don't want to see Pashinyan win, don't want to see him pull Armenia away from Russia. And I would presume, though I don't know for certain, those elements are up to the same sorts of measures that they tried to use to sway the U.S. election in 2016, when clearly Russia supported President Trump, and which they also did in the second election of Emmanuel Macron in France.
That was Matthew Breiser, former U.S. diplomat, joining us from Istanbul, Turkey. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you so much.
All right, that's all we have for now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to A News.